Professor Rex Investigates. Season 2, Episode 2. Loss of Appetite in the Elderly. Professor Rex Investigates number 02. There's a question that almost no one asks out loud, but that should be asked in almost every home in the United States where someone over 70 lives. The question is simple. Why has my father been eating so little in recent weeks? Why does my mother push her plate away after 3 bites and say she's already full? If you've ever heard a phrase like that, or if you've noticed it yourself in the mirror, stay with me, because what I'm going to show you today can completely change the way you look at this detail that almost everyone ignores. I'm Professor Rex, and for many years I've been investigating the subtle signs the human body lets slip before a bigger problem arises. And if there's one thing I've learned from observing thousands of cases over time, it's that loss of appetite in an older person is almost never just a matter of age. Many people think that way. Oh, he's old, it's normal to eat less. But I need to tell you something right now at the very beginning of this video. That's not true. And understanding why it's not true can be the difference between noticing a problem in time or discovering it too late. Let me tell you about Mr. Walter. Walter was 78 years old, living alone in a small house in rural Ohio after his wife, Margaret, passed away. He had always been a man with a hearty appetite. He loved the traditional American breakfast: eggs, bacon, toast, and a strong coffee. But little by little, without anyone noticing, Walter ate less and less. At first, he said he just wasn't hungry that day. Then he started skipping lunch. Then dinner became a cup of tea and nothing more. His daughter, who lived in another state and called every Sunday, didn't notice anything strange in her father's voice, until on a surprise visit during Thanksgiving, she stood paralyzed at the kitchen door. The father she knew, always robust, was visibly thinner, with his clothes loose on his body. And the worst part? Nobody had noticed. This story is not uncommon. Quite the opposite. It repeats itself with slight variations in millions of American families every year. And the reason I'm telling this story right at the beginning is simple. I want you to pay attention to one detail. Loss of appetite almost never happens overnight. It's silent. It's gradual. And that's exactly why it's so dangerous. Because the body gets used to it, the family gets used to it, and when someone finally notices, sometimes months have already passed. Today, I'm going to show you the signs that appear weeks before a serious problem sets in. I'll explain what really happens inside the body when appetite starts to decrease. I'll tell you the most common causes and also the most dangerous ones. And most importantly, I'll give you real strategies based on scientific evidence to reverse this situation before it becomes something more serious. But I need to warn you about something. There's a detail that almost nobody knows about this subject, and I'll save it for the middle of the video because when you understand this, you'll look at any older person in your life in a completely different way. Stay with me until then. Before we get into the causes, I want to ask you a very direct question. Think of someone in your family or even yourself if that's the case. Is this person eating less than they did a year ago? Are they avoiding certain foods they used to love? Do they take longer to finish a meal? Or do they simply stop halfway through? Keep these answers in mind because they will make much more sense shortly. Let's first understand how appetite works, because that's the foundation of everything. Appetite isn't simply a craving. It's an extremely sophisticated system, primarily controlled by a region of the brain called the hypothalamus. This small control center receives signals all the time. Signals from the stomach, indicating whether it's empty or full. Signals from hormones, such as ghrelin, which increases hunger, and leptin, which signals satiety. Signals from the eyes and nose, which awaken desire upon seeing or smelling food. And emotional signals, because yes, eating is also an emotional experience linked to memory, affection, and companionship. Now, here's the first point that very few people know. As we age, this entire system undergoes real, measurable changes, proven by scientific research. Scientists have even given it a name: aging anorexia. And no, this has nothing to do with the eating disorder that many people know by the same similar name. We're talking about a natural, progressive reduction in appetite, which happens due to hormonal, sensory, and digestive changes that come with age. One of the first things that changes is the sense of smell. Did you know that smell is directly linked to taste? Much of what we perceive as flavor actually comes from the nose. That's why when we have a cold and our nose is stuffy, food seems bland. However, with aging, the number of olfactory receptors naturally decreases. The same happens with the taste buds on the tongue. The result is that food begins to seem more bland, more tasteless, more bland, even if it's seasoned exactly the same way as always. Many elderly Americans report the same phrase, almost word for word, to their doctors. "Doctor, the food doesn't taste like anything anymore." And that's just the first thread of this story. The second element is hormonal. As we age, levels of ghrelin, the hormone that stimulates hunger, tend to decrease, while the response to leptin, the satiety hormone, can become more intense. In practice, this means that an older person may feel satisfied with a much smaller amount of food than they did decades ago. This alone would not necessarily be dangerous if the amount of food were still sufficient to meet the body's needs. The problem is when this feeling of early satiety is combined with other factors, and total caloric intake plummets to levels that put health at risk. But there's something even more important that I need to tell you now. Half an hour ago, if I had asked you what factors reduce appetite in older people, you probably would have thought of things related only to natural aging. But the truth is much more complex. And it is precisely this complexity that causes so many cases to go unnoticed until they become serious. Let's talk about medications. This is one of the most silent villains in this story. Many older Americans take, on average, 5, 6, sometimes even 10 different medications a day, including medicines for blood pressure, cholesterol, diabetes, heart conditions, anxiety, and pain. And what few people know is that a surprising number of these medications have reduced appetite as a side effect. Some antidepressants, some high blood pressure medications, certain anti-inflammatories, heart medications such as digoxin, even some iron supplements which cause stomach discomfort and mild but constant nausea. The elderly person doesn't connect that subtle discomfort with the medication they take every day. They only notice that, lately, eating has become an unpleasant task. And there's another detail that few doctors stop to investigate properly, which is the interaction between multiple medications. When you combine 5, 6, 7 different substances, the side effect of one can potentiate the side effect of another. It's like an orchestra where each instrument, alone, makes a discrete sound, but together, they create a noise that is impossible to ignore. Except, in this case, the noise is silent. It appears as mild nausea, dry mouth, altered taste, and gradually, less desire to sit at the table. Now I want to tell you Dorothy's story. Dorothy was 81 years old, lived in a quiet suburb near Sacramento, California, and was known throughout the neighborhood for her famous apple pies. She always cooked for her grandchildren on weekends. But at a certain point, her daughter noticed that Dorothy was cooking less and less, and eating even less than she cooked. When asked why, Dorothy only said that the food seemed tasteless, and that she felt strange in her stomach after eating. No one suspected anything beyond natural aging. Until, during a routine checkup, the doctor reviewed Dorothy's list of medications and realized that she was taking 3 different medications at the same time, all of which had mild nausea as a known side effect. A careful adjustment, made by the doctor himself, was enough for Dorothy's appetite to return almost to normal within a few weeks. The apple pie returned to the family table. I'm telling this story because I want to make one essential point very clear. Never, under any circumstances, adjust or discontinue medication on your own. This is extremely dangerous. What Dorothy did, and what I recommend to anyone in this situation, was to take this observation to the responsible doctor so that they can carefully evaluate, with tests and technical knowledge, whether any safe adjustment can be made. The information I provide here is to help you recognize the signs and ask the right questions during the consultation, not for you to make decisions about medication on your own. Let's continue, because there's a very common mistake I need to point out now. Many people, when they notice that an older relative is eating little, try to solve the problem by offering more food, in the same format as always. A full plate 3 times a day. But for a person whose appetite is already reduced, a large plate can be discouraging just to look at. Science shows that, for elderly people with low appetite, the strategy of smaller, more frequent meals with high nutritional density works much better. That is, small quantities but with a lot of nutritional value per bite. And here's a crucial point that many people forget: protein. As we age, the body naturally loses muscle mass, a process called sarcopenia. And, ironically, it's precisely at the stage of life when we most need protein to preserve this muscle mass that appetite tends to decrease, making it difficult to consume this nutrient adequately. It's a dangerous, vicious cycle. Less appetite leads to less protein. Less protein leads to more muscle loss. More muscle loss leads to more weakness. More weakness leads to less energy to cook and eat. And the cycle repeats itself, becoming increasingly intense. Imagine an escalator moving down on its own. If no one stops it, the person will gradually descend step by step, losing strength, losing weight, losing energy, until one day, a simple cold or a minor fall turns into a serious hospital stay. And that's exactly why doctors take any involuntary weight loss in people over 70 so seriously. Here's a number I want you to remember. According to several American medical societies specializing in geriatrics, an unintentional weight loss of about 5% of body weight in 6 months, or 10% in a year, is already considered a warning sign that warrants medical evaluation. This doesn't mean that all weight loss is serious, but it does mean that it should never be ignored, much less treated as something natural and unimportant. But let's go beyond medication and the natural physiology of aging, because there's an emotional layer to this story that is often the most powerful of all. Let's talk about loneliness. Eating, for human beings, has never been merely a biological act. Eating is a social act, an act of connection. Think of how American families gather around the table on Thanksgiving Day. Think of the ritual of family breakfast, the smell of pancakes on a Sunday morning, the lively conversation during dinner. Now imagine a person who has lost their spouse after 40, 50 years of marriage, and who suddenly finds themselves alone at the table every day, 3 times a day. Many studies show that elderly people who regularly eat alone consume significantly fewer calories than when they eat with others. Food loses its flavor not because of taste, but because of absence. Let me tell you about Harold, a U.S. Navy veteran who served for over 20 years and then retired near Philadelphia. After his wife passed away, Harold, who had always been a strong and disciplined man, began to eat less and less. He wasn't depressed in the classic sense most people imagine. No crying, no apparent sadness in his voice. But he himself said, in a conversation with his son, a phrase that stuck with him: "It no longer makes sense to cook for just one person." Harold's loneliness didn't scream. It whispered, every day at mealtimes, until his weight dropped alarmingly. This is a sign that appears weeks, sometimes months, before a more serious problem, and that almost no one associates with diet. Mood swings, social isolation, disinterest in activities that previously brought pleasure. If you notice this in someone you love, in addition to addressing nutritional issues, try bringing company to mealtimes. Invite them to lunch together. Call them at dinner time. Involve the grandchildren. Sometimes the solution to appetite isn't on the plate, it's in the chair next to it. Before moving on, there's an issue that goes hand in hand with loss of appetite, and which rarely receives the attention it deserves: dehydration. Many people think of dehydration as something that only happens on very hot summer days, but the truth is that older people have a less sensitive thirst mechanism than they did in their youth. This means that the body may have needed water for hours without the person feeling the urge to drink. And, to make matters worse, when appetite decreases, the intake of liquids from food, such as soups, fruits, and vegetables, also decreases. Signs of mild dehydration are often mistaken for simple age-related tiredness. Dry mouth, chapped lips, darker-colored urine, dizziness upon standing quickly, mild mental confusion, and, ironically, even more loss of appetite, because dehydration also reduces the desire to eat. It's another silent cycle similar to what I've shown you before. Less appetite leads to less fluid intake from food, less fluid leads to more dehydration, and more dehydration leads to even less appetite. Let me tell you quickly about Eleanor, a 73-year-old woman who lived near Phoenix, Arizona, a place known for its intense heat most of the year. Eleanor's family noticed that she was confused on certain afternoons, forgetting small things, and eating less and less during the day. Everyone's first thought was that it was a sign of beginning dementia. But the family doctor, attentive to this kind of detail, ordered simple blood tests and discovered that Eleanor was chronically dehydrated, a condition called persistent mild dehydration. With a simple hydration plan throughout the day, including water flavored with slices of lemon and cucumber, which she found more pleasant to drink, and light soups at lunch, Eleanor's mental confusion disappeared almost completely within a few weeks, and her appetite returned as well. Stories like Eleanor's show why I insist so much on never assuming that a symptom is definitively one thing without proper investigation. What seemed like the beginning of dementia was, in fact, the body silently asking for water. Now it's time for me to tell you that detail I promised at the beginning, the one that very few people know, and that completely changes how you'll look at this issue. There's a huge difference between an elderly person who is simply eating less because they've aged, and an elderly person whose loss of appetite is a symptom of something more serious hidden in their body. And the detail that almost no one notices is this: the body usually gives visual and behavioral clues long before weight loss becomes visible on the scale. Pay attention to these signs. Clothes that start to feel loose, even without the intention of losing weight. Rings that become loose on fingers. Fatigue that appears during simple activities, such as climbing a short flight of stairs or walking to the mailbox. Wounds that take longer to heal. Weaker and more brittle nails. Thinner hair, falling out more than usual. Frequent constipation. And, perhaps the most subtle sign of all, a change in mood during meals. If mealtimes, which used to be a moment of pleasure, start to become a time of irritation, rushing to finish, or even avoidance, that's a silent red flag. And there's another sign that practically no one investigates, which is difficulty chewing and swallowing. Dental problems are extremely common in older people in the United States, and often go unnoticed because the person gets used to the pain and simply avoids foods that hurt. Poorly fitting dentures, inflamed gums, sensitive teeth. All of this causes meats, raw vegetables, and even fruits to be gradually eliminated from the diet, without anyone realizing that the cause is dental and not simply a lack of appetite. There is also a condition called dysphagia, which is the real difficulty swallowing, which may be linked to neurological issues, and which deserves specialized medical evaluation, especially if the person starts choking frequently, even with liquids. Now, I need to be honest with you about something that might be uncomfortable, but is extremely important. There are serious illnesses where loss of appetite is one of the first noticeable signs, often even before any tests reveal a problem. Heart failure, when the heart no longer pumps blood as efficiently, can cause abdominal swelling that creates a feeling of constant fullness. Thyroid diseases can completely alter metabolism and appetite. Kidney and liver problems affect how the body processes toxins, leading to persistent nausea. Silent infections such as urinary tract infections, which in older people often don't cause pain but cause mental confusion and general lethargy, including a loss of appetite. And in more serious cases, certain types of cancer, especially of the digestive system, can manifest precisely through loss of appetite and involuntary weight loss before any other symptoms appear. I'm not saying this to scare you, quite the opposite. I'm telling you this because knowledge is the exact opposite of fear. When you know what to look for, you stop ignoring signs and start acting in time. The vast majority of cases of loss of appetite in older people have treatable and often simple causes such as medication adjustment, loneliness, or dental problems. But precisely because this small percentage of more serious causes exist, no persistent loss of appetite should simply be observed from a distance without a proper medical evaluation. So, when is it time to seek medical help more urgently? Let me give you some clear criteria. Unintentional weight loss of 5% or more in 6 months. Food refusal lasting more than 2 consecutive weeks. Progressive weakness that interferes with daily activities. New mental confusion or sudden worsening of memory associated with loss of appetite. Pain when swallowing or frequent choking. Fever, even a low-grade one, associated with loss of appetite, and any very rapid change that happens in a few days instead of weeks. In these cases, a medical consultation cannot wait. Now, for the most common cases related to natural aging, loneliness, or small adjustments needed in daily life, there are real science-based strategies that make a huge difference. And that's what I want to talk about now, because it's no use identifying the problem without giving you a practical way to solve it. The first strategy is to enhance flavor, not salt. As taste buds diminish with age, many people try to compensate by increasing the salt in their food, which can be dangerous for those with high blood pressure. The smart alternative is to use fresh herbs, garlic, onion, lemon, mild peppers, and spices like cinnamon and cumin, which stimulate the palate in a much safer and more interesting way. Many American nutritionists recommend exactly this strategy for older patients. The second strategy is nutritional density. This means choosing foods that deliver a lot of nutritional value in a small quantity. Avocado, eggs, Greek yogurt, cheeses, crushed nuts, olive oil, shredded chicken breast, beans, and legumes. Instead of insisting on large meals, 3 small meals plus 2 or 3 nutritious snacks throughout the day usually work much better. The third strategy involves the mealtime environment. Eating in company with a nicely set table, good lighting, and even relaxing background music may seem like a small detail, but studies show that the environment directly influences the amount of food consumed. Small rituals, such as Sunday breakfast with the family gathered together, or the habit of inviting a neighbor for lunch during the week, have a real and measurable impact. The fourth strategy is light and regular physical movement. It seems contradictory, but walking, even for just a few minutes outdoors in the sunlight, naturally stimulates the appetite, in addition to helping with the absorption of vitamin D, which is also linked to muscle and immune health. A short walk before lunch can make a real difference in how much you want to eat. The fifth strategy is to take care of hydration, but with attention to an important detail. Drinking a lot of water right before meals can create a feeling of fullness in the stomach, which further reduces appetite. Ideally, hydration should be distributed throughout the day, between meals, and not immediately before them. And the sixth strategy, perhaps the most forgotten of all, is taking care of oral health. A visit to the dentist, the correct adjustment of a prosthesis, the treatment of inflamed gums, can almost magically restore the pleasure of eating to someone who has been avoiding certain foods for months because of the pain. There is also the issue of nutritional supplementation, which is a delicate subject that I need to address very carefully here. In some cases, when diet alone is not enough, doctors and nutritionists may recommend specific caloric and protein supplements, such as those frequently found in American pharmacies, specifically designed for elderly people with low food intake. But I need to make it absolutely clear that this type of supplementation should always be prescribed and monitored by a healthcare professional, never chosen independently, because the dose, type, and need vary enormously from person to person, especially when other health conditions are involved, such as diabetes or kidney disease. But wait, because the worst is yet to come, in the sense that there's a layer to this story that almost no video on this subject mentions, and which I consider fundamental. I'm talking about the relationship between appetite and neurological diseases, such as dementia and Parkinson's. In people with Parkinson's disease, the disease itself affects the muscles used for chewing and swallowing, making eating slower, more tiring, and in some cases even uncomfortable. In addition, certain medications used to treat Parkinson's can also cause nausea as a side effect. The result is a silent combination that gradually reduces food intake without anyone realizing the direct link to the disease. In people with some degree of dementia, including Alzheimer's, the problem can be even more subtle. Sometimes the person forgets they have already eaten or forgets to eat. Other times, they no longer recognize the food in front of them or have difficulty using cutlery and, out of shame or frustration, prefer simply not to eat rather than ask for help. More experienced caregivers learn, over time, small tricks such as reducing distractions during meals, offering small amounts of food at a time instead of a plate full of options, and using plates of contrasting colors with the table, which, according to some studies, can help people with certain degrees of dementia to see the food better and eat a larger quantity. There's another element that's rarely mentioned, and which I find surprising: sleep. Research has shown a real link between sleep quality and appetite regulation, even in older people. Poor sleep disrupts those hormones I mentioned earlier, ghrelin and leptin, altering the perception of hunger and satiety the next day. Many elderly Americans report difficulty sleeping, whether due to chronic pain, anxiety, or simply the natural changes in their sleep cycle that occur with age. And the cycle closes because poor sleep reduces appetite, poor eating weakens the body, and a weakened body sleeps even worse. And there's another physical sign I want to highlight separately, because it's often confused with something else: constipation. When the intestines slow down, something common with age, and aggravated by low fluid and fiber intake, a person feels a bloated, uncomfortable abdomen, and this feeling of fullness directly reduces the desire to eat. It's a simple, almost trivial detail, but when corrected with more fiber, more water, and more physical activity, it can restore appetite surprisingly quickly. I'm sharing all these details because I want you to understand the true scope of this issue. There isn't a single cause, and there isn't a single solution. Rather, There's a set of pieces that, together, form the puzzle of an older person's health. And the role of the observer, whether a son, a daughter, a spouse, or the person themselves, is precisely to notice when any of these pieces begin to fall out of place. Now, let me return to the story of Walter, that gentleman from Ohio I mentioned at the beginning. After that Thanksgiving, when his daughter noticed how much weight her father had lost, she didn't stand still. She took Walter to the doctor, who identified a combination of factors. A slight thyroid problem, not yet diagnosed, coupled with profound loneliness after the loss of his wife, and a worn-out dental prosthesis that no longer fit properly. 3 factors, none of them individually dramatic, but which together pushed Walter to a real risk of malnutrition. The treatment didn't involve anything extraordinary. Thyroid adjustment, a new dental prosthesis, and a new habit, which his daughter herself created. Every Sunday, she took her grandchildren to lunch at their grandfather's house. In a few months, Walter was, in his own words, eating like a man 20 years younger. I'm telling this story because I want you to understand something essential. There is rarely a single, isolated cause for loss of appetite in an older person. Most of the time, it's several small factors adding up silently over time. And that's precisely why the solution usually involves several small fronts working together, not a single magic solution. Before I conclude this topic, I want to share one more important point. Many families, when they notice that a father, mother, or grandparent is eating less, try to insist, pressure, almost force the person to eat more. Eat more. You need to eat. But the science of eating behavior in the elderly shows that this pressure, applied incorrectly, can have the opposite effect, generating resistance, anxiety around the table, and even aversion to certain foods. The most effective approach is not pressure, but creating pleasant opportunities to eat. Offer food without aggressively insisting. Create inviting moments. Involve the person in choosing what will be prepared. Ask what they feel like eating instead of simply imposing a menu. And here's one last thought, perhaps the most important in this entire video. Paying attention to an older person's appetite is, in fact, a way of paying attention to them as a whole. A plate of food is often the most honest mirror of what's happening inside, both physically and emotionally. When someone stops enjoying eating, it's often because, in some way, that person is also losing pleasure in other areas of their life. And caring for this isn't just a medical issue. It's a matter of love, presence, and genuine attention. So, let me ask you those questions again now that you know so much more about this subject. Is there someone in your life who's eating less than they did a year ago? Have you noticed your clothes getting looser, or fatigue appearing even with simple tasks? Maybe you're the one going through this, feeling like food has lost some of its appeal. If any of these questions resonated with you, now is the perfect time to act. Not tomorrow, not next week. Now, let's summarize the most important points we covered today so you can remember them clearly. Loss of appetite shouldn't be treated as an automatic and harmless consequence of age. It can have natural physiological causes, but it can also be a sign of medication side effects, dental problems, loneliness, depression, or, in more serious cases, diseases that need to be identified and treated as soon as possible. Warning signs include unintentional weight loss, clothes becoming too loose, progressive weakness, mood swings at mealtimes, and difficulty chewing or swallowing. Strategies that really work involve smaller, more nutritious meals, intelligent use of natural spices, company during meals, light physical activity, oral health care, and, when necessary, professional guidance for supplementation. And most importantly, any persistent change in appetite deserves a conversation with a doctor, because identifying the cause early is always simpler safer, and much more effective than trying to reverse an already advanced condition. I want to leave you with one last message of hope, because despite everything we've discussed today, this is one of the areas of aging health where the most difference can be made with simple actions. Walter started eating well again. Dorothy started making her apple pies again. Harold, the Navy veteran, began having lunch twice a week with a group of other veterans at the community center near his home, and said, months later, that he rediscovered the pleasure of sitting at the table. None of these stories involved miracles. They involved attention, small adjustments, and, above all, someone who decided to pay attention before it was too late. If this video helped you see something that might have gone unnoticed in your own life, or in the life of someone you love, I sincerely ask you to subscribe to the channel, leave a like, and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next videos where I continue investigating with you the silent signs of healthy aging. Share this video with family and friends who also need to hear this. And, if you can, write in the comments the phrase, "I will take better care of my health," because every person who writes this shows me that this work is making a real difference. I'm already investigating the next mystery of healthy aging, a sign that often appears disguised as simple forgetfulness, but which can reveal much more than we imagine. Until the next video, take care of yourself, take care of those you love, and never underestimate the small signs that your body insists on showing you.